Hello everyone. It's a great pleasure to present at the Global Excel Summit South for the second time. I would like to take a moment to introduce myself. I am Nabil Murad, and I'm a Microsoft Excel MVP. I live in Toronto, Canada, where I work as a professor of computer applications in a college. I also deliver corporate training to many companies. I do that for a living, while my passion is to share my knowledge with all Excel lovers through my YouTube channel, Facebook page, blog site, and other social platforms. Last year in the summit, my presentation was about advanced data validation in Excel. Since more and more people are creating Excel dashboards, my presentation this year will be about a unique functionality in an Excel dashboard. A dashboard is a graphic summary of the most important information that answers questions about your data, that answers questions about your business. Consolidated and arranged in one single screen so that information can be monitored at a glance. Excel makes your dashboards interactive. Today I want to show you a creative interactivity in a dashboard, where we have the source data and multiple pivot tables used in preparation for the dashboard, and the final dashboard itself, all overlapping each other and sharing the same worksheet in multiple layers, but we switch between them with a drop list. Let me show you the finished project. Here is my finished project where I summarize a large data set consisting of thousands of records and so many columns about a computer company selling different products. So I have in this dashboard on a bar chart the sales by manager. I have on a column chart the quantity sold by product. I also have on a line chart the sales by month. I have on a donut chart the sales by region, and on a map I see the number of transactions for each state. I also have some metrics. I have the total sales and the total quantity sold. Everything is interactive, so I can filter by using my slicers. I have a slicer for the state and I have a slicer for the quarter. So if I select some of the states like this, everything is updating. If I select a different combination like different states, or if I select a different quarter, then everything updates on the fly and is totally dynamic. In order to create this dashboard out of the source data, then I had to create 7 different pivot tables. These pivot tables were created on the same worksheet behind this dashboard, and the dashboard appears as a separate layer on top of the 7 preparation pivot tables and so many other calculations that I created in a preparation worksheet. I also created a drop list in cell B1, and this drop list shows only 3 options. If I click on the down arrow, I can select Analysis to reveal the pivot tables. When I click on Analysis, here are the preparation pivot tables. If I click on the down arrow and select Dashboard, I'm back to my dashboard. If I click one more time and select to view the source data, then I'm going to split the window into 2 parts. On the left side, I see the thousands of records of the source data. On the right side, I see either my dashboard or my analysis. To go back, I click on the down arrow one more time, and if I select Analysis, I'm back to Analysis. I see the different pivot tables. I can select the dashboard, and I see the dashboard. All of them are sharing the same worksheet, and I want to show you how to create this nice functionality from scratch in Excel. Here is my start file. In this worksheet, I have a data set coming from a computer company that shows a company, a state, a region, a manager, a product, a month, a quarter, the quarter number, the order date, the ship date, the quantity, the price, and the sales amount. I would like to get insights about my data, then I'll be creating a dashboard. And the dashboard consists of 3 parts. The source data, this is what I see in front of me right now. a preparation worksheet, and this is the real kitchen where all the cooking is being done. In the preparation worksheet, I'll be creating multiple pivot tables to answer questions about my data. I'll be creating some slicers, I'll be creating some KPIs, and I'll be creating some charts. Finally, after creating all the pivot tables and charts and formatting them, I should be copying all these elements to another worksheet, the dashboard worksheet. I want to show you the dashboard worksheet. All what I did in this worksheet is that I created some labels. I created in cell B1 a drop list that shows one of three options. This drop list is not doing anything right now, but later on it will have a powerful functionality. And instead of having a preparation worksheet different than the presentation worksheet, which is the dashboard, I'm going to combine everything in one single sheet and be able to switch between them by using the functionality of this drop list. I start my project by creating a bunch of pivot tables. I'll be creating all the pivot tables in this worksheet, then I'll be creating all the visualization on top of the pivot tables. So I go to the data worksheet, I select any single cell, and to create a pivot table, I click on the Insert tab of the ribbon and I click on Pivot Table. The pivot table wizard pops up, and here I want to create my pivot table in the existing worksheet. I select existing. I want to create it in the dashboard worksheet. I go to the dashboard and I select cell B4, and then I hit OK. For this simple pivot table, I want to see the sales by manager. Then I select from the pivot table field list. I select manager and drop it to the rows. I select sales and drop it to the values. I want to improve the appearance of my pivot table, and I start by formatting the numbers. I select any single number, I right-click and select Number Format. I'll be formatting these numbers as currency with 0 decimal place, and I hit OK. Next, I would like to change the layout to a tabular layout to bring the label here at the top. I go to the Design tab, click on Report Layout, and select Show in Tabular Form. I would like to apply a style, then I click on the down arrow of the Styles gallery and I select one of the medium styles, let it be this blue style. One more thing I want to do, I want whenever I use a slicer later on to filter my pivot tables, I don't want the width of the column to change. That's a property that we set in the pivot table, and I do that by right-clicking and select Pivot Table Options. The Pivot Table Options dialog box opens. In this dialog box, I take the check away from AutoFit column width on update. I hit OK. And finally, I want to name this pivot table Manager Sales. I go to the Pivot Table Analyze tab, and I name my pivot table Manager Sales. And I hit Enter. Naming pivot tables is extremely useful when we create a lot of them and we want to connect them together to one single slicer. Then we'll be using these names to identify each one of the pivot tables. Instead of recreating the quantity by product, the sales by month, the sales by region, total quantity, total sales, and other pivot tables, all what I'm going to do at this point is to copy the pivot table and then modify it. To make some room, I'm going to close the pivot table field list. I can bring it back at any time. And I'm going to select this entire pivot table, and then I copy it by dragging. I hover over the border. When I see the mouse pointer changing to a four-headed arrow, I press Ctrl and drag and position it in cell E4. I want to modify this pivot table. Then I bring the pivot table field list, right-click and select Pivot Table Field List. Instead of Manager, I want to see the product. Then I take the Manager out of the rows drop area and let it go. I select the product and I drop it in the rows area. And then I want to bring the quantity. Instead of the sales, I drag the sales out. I bring the quantity. Someone might think you created the pivot table from scratch. No, I saved some steps because it inherits the formatting, and that's fine. I just want to change the color of this pivot table to match the color of the title. I go to the Design tab and I want to select a different style. Let's say I'm selecting this one, and I want to rename this pivot table Product Quantity by going to the Pivot Table Analyze tab, and I want to create a name. I name it Product Quantity. Now I want to repeat for the sales by month. So I select this entire pivot table. I press Ctrl and drag and drop it in column H. Now I want to modify the fields. Instead of product, I'm going to take it out. And instead, I want to bring the month. So I drag the months to the rows. I have a list of months, and by default, Excel splits the months into months and individual days. So if you click to expand, you will see the individual days. I don't want that. Then I'm going to take the second occurrence out, and I get only the month. And here I don't want to see the quantity, then I drag it out, and instead I bring the sales. Then I have the sales by month. It looks like I lost the formatting here. Then I'm going to apply it one more time. Number format, I select currency, and I don't want any decimal. I hit OK. And finally, I want to change the style. I go to the Design tab and I select another style. That one matches the label. For my next pivot table, I'll be copying the first one. I drag while pressing Ctrl and let it go in column K. Here I want to make a change. I want to see the sales by region. I already have the sales. Instead of manager, I take it out and I bring the region, and that's fine. I want to change the style. Then I click on the Design tab and I want to change the style to this orange style. I want to name this pivot table and the previous one as well. Then I go to the Pivot Table Analyze tab. Let's name this one Region Sales. And I want to name the previous one Month Sales. I still want to create one more pivot table. For the transactions by state, I copy this last pivot table, Control drag, and I drop it. For this one, I want the number of transactions in each state. So instead of region, I take it out and I bring the state. And instead of sum of sales, I want to change the summary function. And instead of sum of sales, I want to count the number of transactions. Then I right-click, hover over Summarize Values By, and from the flyout menu, I select a count. I need to change the formatting to just a number. Right-click, Number Format, and I select Number, and then I hit OK. Now I don't see the $sign. The final thing I want to do is to change the style and name this pivot table. I go to the Design tab, click on the down arrow, and I'll be selecting a different style. Let it be this one, and I want to name it Transaction States. I go to the Pivot Table Analyze tab, and I name it Transaction States. I want to create two more pivot tables that I'll be using for creating some KPI or cards, one for the total quantity and one for the total sales. I can simply copy one of the existing pivot tables to inherit the properties. So I'm selecting this pivot table. I press Ctrl and drag it down under total sales. And then I open the pivot table field list by going to the Pivot Table Analyze tab and click on Field List. I don't want the region, I just want the sum of sales. And now I have the sum of sales. I can copy it to put it in L20. I drag it to the right, and here I have the sum of sales. I want to copy this pivot table for the total quantity. I hover over the border, I drag it up, and here I also have the sum of sales. I also want to replace the sales by the quantity. Then I drag the quantity and I drag the sales out, and here is the total quantity. And I finished creating these pivot tables as well. I need to name them and assign a style. I click on the Design tab and I want to give it a different style. Let it be this one. And I do the same for the second pivot table, total sales. I want to give it the same style. And I want to name both of them, total sales and total quantity. I go to the pivot table analyze tab, and this one will be total sales, and the previous one will be total quantity. I'll be using the transaction by state pivot table for creating a map visualization. And I cannot do that directly from the pivot table, then I need to prepare for that, because if I select any single cell and then I go to the Insert tab of the ribbon and click on the down arrow for map and click on this map, it tells me it's not possible to create it directly from the pivot table. To bypass this limitation, I'm going to reference the pivot table. Then I select cell Q4, I type an equal sign, I click on N4, and then I want to copy it to the right and down, and this will be the version used for creating my map. My final step in the preparation before creating my visualization is to create two dynamic labels in cell V1 and V2. I'm going to navigate to the right, and in cell V1 I'll be typing equal sign in double quotation total quantity. I close the double quotation and I want to join it to cell L16, the pivot table. But I want to see it in two lines, then I'm going to use a character function. I type the joining operator of Excel, Shift 7 on my keyboard, and then I type CHAR, I hit tab, and to push it to a new line, I type 10 and I close the bracket for the character function. Then I want to join the character function to L16. I type another joining operator of Excel and I click on cell L16. When I hit enter, then I get the total quantity, but it appears as if it is on one single line. When I copy it to the text box, it will appear on two lines. In cell V2, I do the same for the total sales, equal sign, double quote total sales, and I close the double quotation. I use the joining operator of Excel, a character function, I hit tab, I type 10, close the bracket, another joining operator of Excel, and I click on cell L21. Here we'll have a problem. When I hit enter, the number has lots of decimals. Then we need to include L21 in a function that takes care of formatting. That's the perfect job of the dollar function. I hit F2, and before L21, I type dollar, I hit tab, and I close the bracket after the dollar function. I hit enter, and I would have created my dynamic labels. Let's copy them or reference them into text boxes. I go to the Insert tab of the ribbon and then I click on Text Box. I click and drag to position my first text box. I hit F2 and then I type equal sign and I click on cell V1. When I hit enter, now the contents of cell V1 appear on two lines, and that's perfect. I can resize my text box, and then I want to copy it, control and drag, and modify the cell reference and make it V2. Now I select the two text boxes by pressing Shift and format both of them simultaneously. I go to the Format tab. For the shape fill, I don't want a fill. Then I select No Fill. And for the shape outline, I don't want an outline, then I select no outline. On the Home tab, I can center up and down and right and left. I can bold my text as well, and I finished creating the two cards or the two text boxes. My next step is to start creating my visualization. And my visualization will include a bar chart for the first pivot table, a column chart for the second, a line chart for the third, a donut chart for the sales by region, and a map for the transaction by state. I start creating the first visualization, I select it, and then I go to the Insert tab. That should be a bar chart. I click on the down arrow for the clustered column chart, and I select a 2D by chart. We don't need these buttons, the field buttons. Then I right click and select hide all field buttons. I don't want the legend. I select it and then hit delete. I don't want the vertical grid lines. I select them and then hit delete. I want to customize the label to read sales by manager. Then I type sales by manager. I hit enter, and on the home tab I can format it, I can bold it, I can make it blue. I'll be unifying the color for all the labels. I also want to bold the vertical axis. I hit Ctrl B. I want to change the units for the horizontal axis. Then I hit Ctrl 1 to open the format axis pane. And here I want to express it, let's say, in thousands. And then I can delete it. Then I hit the delete key. Why did I format it if I intend to delete it? Because I'll be adding data labels that will inherit that formatting. I select any single bar and I want to reduce the gap between them. Then I drag the gap width slider to the left to reduce the gap between the different bars. I want to add some data labels. Then I click on the plus sign and select data labels. I can bold them. I select one of them and hit Ctrl B to bold all of them. Finally, I want each one of these bars to appear in a different color. Then I click on one of them, go to the fill and line icon, check the box for vary color by point, and finally I want to bevel them or give them a 3D appearance by going to the Format tab, select Shape Effect, Shadow, and then I want an inner shadow. And I finished creating my very first chart. I'll be creating the other charts as well. An important property to change for each one of the charts, we don't want the chart to move whenever we make a change in the column width or we insert or delete column. Then for this chart, I'm going to select the properties, and for the properties, I select the option don't move or size with cells, and we finished with this one. We'll come back, resize and reposition all the visualizations after bringing the background, but for now I want to create the other charts as well. The second one will be a column chart. This one can be created with a single shortcut Alt F1, and I need to format it. I'll be doing that once I create all the charts. I select the sales by month, and this one should be a line chart with markers. I go to the Insert tab and click on the down arrow for the line charts and select the style with marker. And I want to create one for the sales by region as a donut chart. Then I select it, I go to the Insert tab and I click on the down arrow for the pie chart. I select the donut chart, and finally I want to create my map. I can navigate to the right a little bit, and because I cannot create the map directly from the pivot table, I reference the pivot table. I'm going to select any single cell and then go to the Insert tab and create my map by clicking on the down arrow for map and create the map. Now I have to go to all the visualizations, format them one by one, reposition them, resize them in preparation for bringing the background. I'll do that and come back. Now I created and formatted all my charts. The appearance doesn't look nice. They are overlapping the pivot tables, but everything will be fixed in a moment. And before I fix it, I need to create two slicers. I can create them based on any one of the pivot tables. I'll be selecting the quantity by product pivot table. I go to the pivot table Analyze tab, click on Insert Slicer. I want a slicer for the state, and I want a slicer for the quarter. I hit OK, and here are my two slicers. They need some attention. I'm going to resize my slicer for the quarter and split it into two columns. Then I go to the Slicer tab and split the single column into two columns, and I can resize one more time. I don't want to see this header. Then I right click, select Slicer Settings, and in the Slicer Settings dialog box I take the check away from Display Header and then I hit OK, and that will be my quarter slicer. For the state, I want to split it into 6 columns. Then I increase the number of columns into 6, and I want to resize it as well. I reposition my slicers. Everything will be fine-tuned. But one more thing I want to do is to give it a style. Then I'm going to select a style from the slicer tab. I click on the down arrow and let's select this blue style. And the same style for the quarter. That's fine. Now it's time to add a background. A background is a regular picture. You can get a picture from the internet, you can get a picture from a local file. What I personally did, I downloaded a certain picture from the internet and I took it to PowerPoint where I customized it with some text boxes and I have it available here below. Here is the picture that I downloaded from the internet. In PowerPoint, I created two shapes with a white fill and a blue outline. I also created a rounded rectangle. I have a logo for the company and I have a text box. All that was done in PowerPoint and then I brought them here and I grouped them all together. I'm just going to drag them up, so this will be my background. And because it was created before the shapes, it will appear behind the different charts and behind the different visualizations. Now that I have my visualization in place, I want to position and fine-tune all the charts. And note that for all the charts I have a background. I'm going to reduce the transparency of the background for each one of the charts. So let's start with the first one. On the Format tab, I click on Shape Fill. I make sure that it's a white color. I click on the down arrow one more time. I select More Fill Color to get this transparency slider. And I'm going to set it to 80%. And that's fine. Now through the chart, I can see part of the background, but I can still read all the information on my chart. I remove the outline as well. So I click on the down arrow, remove the outline. Shape outline, no outline, and when I click outside, now it's becoming part of the background. I want to do the same exact thing, resize, reposition, increase the transparency of the background for the different charts, and resize and reposition my slicers. Now after inserting the background in place, it's a regular picture, having some shapes and some text boxes. I customized, repositioned, resized all the visualizations and the slicers. If you remember, we created earlier two text boxes, and these text boxes should appear in these two shapes. Then I'm going to navigate to the right. Remember that all the pivot tables are in the background. I'm going to select these two text boxes and I drag them. For the total sales by quantity, I'll put it in this shape. And for the total sales, I want to drag it and put it in the other shape. I can keep refining my visualization and my dashboard the way I like. But for now, we want to start talking about the functionality. I want to be able to use my drop list. We chose three options: Source, Analysis, and Dashboard. And by selecting Analysis, I want to hide all the visualizations. Remember, each one of these elements is an object, and each object can be hidden or revealed in Visual Basic. Then I need to write a separate line of code to control the visibility of each one of the 13 objects I have in this dashboard. If you want to see the different objects, then I'm going to open the selection pane. The shortcut is Alt F10. And here are the different elements in the selection pane. So if I click on quarter, then I'm hiding one slicer. I can hide the second one. I can hide all of them with one single click. And now when I hide them, it reveals the pivot tables behind them. That's the concept of the code. I'll be adjusting the visibility of each one of these elements. But instead of creating 13 lines of code, I'm going to group all these elements together, and instead of creating 13 lines, I'll be creating one single line of code. I click on Show All. I close the selection pane, and I want to group all these objects. That will make my life a lot easier when creating the code. To group these objects, I can select any one of them, and then I hit Ctrl A to select all of them. And then I go to the Picture Format tab, and I select Group, and click on Group. Now all these objects become one single object, and one single line of code will either hide them or reveal them. Let me bring the selection pane one more time, Alt F10, and here I have Group 31. Let's give it a name. I click where it says Group 31, whatever the number you have, and I'm going to name this group Nabil, and I hit Enter. If I hide Nabil by clicking on this eye icon, then I see all the pivot tables underneath. If I show Nabil, then I see the dashboard. What about the data source? Well, for the data source, I go to the View tab of the ribbon, and I want to open a new window. And when I open a new window, I select Data, and here I see the data in the new window, but I want to see the two windows simultaneously. Then on the View tab, I click on Arrange All, and I want to arrange them vertically. When I do this, on one side, I see the dashboard or the pivot tables, and on the other side, I see the data source. Whenever you split a window, the second window gets an incremental number of the file name. So if your file name is named Start, then the second window is called Start2. And I'll be capitalizing on that when creating my code. Let's close the second window and maximize the first one. And now I want to start creating my code. To create a code, I need to go to the Visual Basic Editor, Alt F11. I want to create a module by clicking on the Insert menu and select Module. And in the new module, I'll be creating a subroutine and I'll name it Dashboard. So I type sub dashboard. And when I hit Enter, an opening and a closing bracket has been added. The end sub has been added as well. What I would like to say, if in the sheet named Dashboard, cell B1, my drop list, has a value of dashboard, then make all the shape named Nabil visible. So I write it like this. If in the sheet named Dashboard, range B1, which is my drop list, has a value of dashboard, which means I select dashboard from the drop list, if sheets dashboard in double quoting brackets dot range B1 in double quoting brackets dot value equal dashboard in double quotes, then what would you like to do? Well, I want the group named Nabil to be visible. Sheets dashboard in double quoting brackets dot shapes Nabil in double quoting brackets dot visible equal 1. Then all the visualizations will be visible and will cover the pivot tables. Otherwise, what do you like to do? We have three options. We have source, we have analysis, and we have dashboard. Then I write else if sheets dashboard dot range b1 dot value, which is my drop list. If I select analysis, then in this case, same line of code. I want the group Nabil to be hidden. Then I set the visible property to 0. The last option, what do you want to do if we are not selecting dashboard, if we are not selecting analysis, which means source is selected, then to close the if statement, I type else, active window, open a new window, as if I'm clicking on the View tab and I click on New Window. In the new window, activate the worksheet data, and then arrange the windows side by side, windows.arrange space, arrange style, colon equal sign, Excel vertical, and that will put the two windows side by side. Whenever I test this code, if I already have two windows open side by side due to the selection of source from the drop list, then I want to close the window showing the data and maximize the other one. So I write, on error, resume next. So these two lines will work fine if the window is already split. Otherwise, they will return an error. Then I'm accommodating for that with the line on error, resume next. On error, resume next. Windows, in double quote the file name with an incremental number 2 dot close and application.windows state equal Excel maximized. You might have the two separated by spaces and a dash from the file name. You might have it in other versions separated by a colon. You have to check it by arranging the two windows side by side and just copy the same exact format. And I finished creating my code. As simple as this. 3 options, either dashboard or analysis or else that will display the 3 options. And now I want to test my code. Then I close the Visual Basic editor to go back to Excel. Now if I test from the drop list, nothing will happen. So if I click on the down arrow and select Analysis or select Source, nothing happens because the code is not triggered. Then I'm going to create an event code that says whenever there is a change in B1, go ahead and trigger the subroutine named Dashboard. And to do that, I right-click on the Sheet tab, select View Code, and here I'm going to select a worksheet change event. So if I click on the down arrow of this drop list and I select worksheet, it puts a different event. That's not the one we want. I click on the other drop list and select the change event. I can go and delete the first one. And this event simply says, if you want to look at Excel, if my target equals cell B1, go ahead and trigger or call the subroutine named dashboard. And here is my code. Private sub, worksheet change by val, target as range. If the target dot address equals range B1 dot address, then call dashboard, which is the name of the sub procedure that we created. And then I close with an end if. Now we have to go back to Excel and test the drop list and test the functionality of the dashboard. This is the moment of truth. I click on the drop list in cell B1, and if I select Analysis, all the visualization should disappear and reveals the pivot tables underneath. If I click one more time and select Dashboard, now I can see all the visualization and my dashboard. Now let's test the interactivity of the dashboard. If I select some of the states, they are only affecting one single chart. Then I want to link the slicers all together to all the visualization. Then I select the slicer, right click, select report connection, check the box for all the pivot tables except the month sales. I don't want it to interact with this slicer, and I'm checking all of them with the exception of month sales and map. I hit OK. And for the second slicer, I'm going to link it to all the visualizations, all the pivot tables with the exception of the sales by month. Then I check the box for this one. I check all the boxes. This is the report connection. And then when I hit OK, now if I select quarter one, all the visualization become interactive. I can release my slicer. I can make a different selection, and everything looks beautiful and dynamic and fully interactive. The final option that we didn't check, what about selecting from the drop list source? So if I go to the drop list one more time and I select source, now everything is working fine. I can go back to my dashboard by clicking on the drop list and I select dashboard. I can switch to the pivot tables if I want, and all the interactivity and all the functionality is working fine, and we finished creating our project. I hope you found value in my presentation. And until we meet in another learning adventure, that was Nabil Murad. Thanks for watching and see you next time.